everyone. Jamie Maloney, your host of the all-new That Business Show 2.0, weekday mornings 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. on TampaBayRadio.com. All shows made available on demand over on iTunes and YouTube in high-definition video. My guest today, Gleb Tsipursky. He is a disaster avoidance expert. Learn more about him at glebtsipursky.com. And Tsipursky spelled T-S-I-P-U-R-S-K-Y. So again, T-S-I-P-U-R-S-K-Y. And we're going to be talking about steps for avoiding disastrous decisions to open up the topic today. So Gleb, welcome to the program today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jamie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So first off, before we start talking about the these steps for avoiding the disastrous decisions, something I know I've made many disastrous decisions myself. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm a professor at Ohio State researching decision-making and emotional and social intelligence in business and political contexts. So that's I decided that I don't want to stay just in the ivory tower. And I want to bring these ideas out to business professionals and my civic activism and politics. So this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm focusing on. And I run a nonprofit called Intentional Insights at intentionalinsights.org, where I laid out articles and other people like me who have scholarly expertise in decision-making and emotional and social intelligence also publish articles.
It's an interesting topic to me too, because I wonder why I behave the way I behave sometimes, why I make decisions I make. And you've got to be having a heyday with the political environment out there with regard to decision making and studying and stuff. And so I was on your site there. I noticed that you have a blog and some posting, and so you're putting your analysis into that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that down the line. But let's open it up. And also, you have an offer for our listeners out there today. So let's go and extend that to them, please.
Sure. So anyone who emails me at gleb@intentionalinsights.org, that's Gleb, my first name, at intentionalinsights.org, will get a free tip sheet on avoiding disasters in their decisions. So avoiding disastrous decision making. And you have to tell me that you heard me on That Business Show. So just tell me that you heard me on That Business Show, and you will not have to pay anything for this tip sheet, which ordinarily would cost money.
All right. So 7 steps for avoiding disastrous decisions. Let's start with the basics. Give me the first step.
The first step is to list out your options so that you know what you're actually deciding between, and put that down on the actual sheet of paper, and so that you can figure that out.
So the power of writing stuff down, I think that works across so many different things. Especially you're staying on task. You hear about the power of writing something down. There's something that connects actuality with the mind when you put it to paper. And so when you're making important decisions, writing it down comes into play. Again, an excellent opening step here. Continue. Step 2.
The step 2 is to write down what kind of characteristics you're deciding on. For example, when you're deciding which business client to work with, do you want to focus on costs, or let's say supplier? Do you want to focus on costs, on reputation, on experience, on your existing relationship? So write down all the things that matter in making your decisions, all the characteristics of the decision that you care about.
Now, why did you go into the field of study of decision making? What about decision making intrigued you? And you're at the highest level here in academia studying it, so it's something that's obviously really that you really much enjoy. What led you down this path?
What led me down this path is that I saw people around me making really bad decisions. For example, we can look at Blockbuster. About 10 years ago, Netflix approached Blockbuster and said, hey, let's collaborate and set up an online streaming service. And Blockbuster was like, no, we are the big guys. We have all the stores. We don't really need you. Well, look at where they are now. Blockbuster is bankrupt and Netflix is getting all that money. That was a disastrous decision for Blockbuster. It was pretty bad. And we see so many other disastrous decisions taking place every day. For example, an example from 10 years ago, the 2008 fiscal crisis. Now, you think the folks who were buying their homes in 2007 thought that they would be underwater in 2008? No, they didn't think so, but they just failed to look at the long term, just like Blockbuster failed to look at the long term. House prices aren't going to keep rising forever. How much however much we want to believe that they will.
Right.
And that's one of the things that cause us to make disastrous decisions.
Yeah, the example of Blockbuster confounds me too, because that writing was on the wall really in the 90s. I thought, that the on-demand content and Blockbuster controlled the market in the 80s and 90s with regard to video. They should have just stepped right into the online on-demand market. And then next thing you know, the little convenience store side stands, the red boxes popped up, Netflix pops up, cable starts taking over, and Blockbuster. There was a Blockbuster next to my real estate office up until about 2 years ago, and I was surprised it was still there. It lasted up until about 2 years ago, and then they finally they disappeared one night, and the building was rebuilt out, and somebody else moved in. So I think they're completely out of business today, right?
Yeah, well, it's not. It's only one of many examples. I mean, look at online pharmacies. You think that Walgreens or CVS controls the market there? No, they don't.
No.
Express Scripts control and others control the market there. They should have controlled the market there. What about things like Walmart? You think they're the biggest online retailer? No, Amazon is.
Amazon, yeah.
Why isn't Walmart the biggest online retailer? Well, they weren't smart about it. They didn't make a smart decision about where to invest their money. Just like the people who bought their homes in 2008 didn't make smart decisions about where to invest their money.
Yeah.
So this is what I want to avoid.
Yeah,
this is where I go and I consult for companies, and I do speeches and trainings and coaching to help people avoid these sorts of disastrous situations. That's why I create the tip sheet.
Speaking of Walmart and the Amazon example, when we see a lot in reading on studies and stuff that the future of big box retailers is not in the big box, it's going to be online. Is that a prediction that you think down the line is we're no longer going to go to stores? Everything will be online.
I think that that's absolutely the case. We will get rid of stores, and the large majority of shopping will be done online. I mean, right now, let's be honest. So I go into stores. I go into, let's say, Skechers. I get my shoes at Skechers. I go into stores and I try on a bunch of shoes. You think I actually buy them in Skechers?
No, you go online.
I go online and I buy it for half price, from somewhere else, the same shoe store. I think the future of stores, I know so many people who do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not, the future of stores is not going to be profitable. You'll need some stores just for people to try things on and then actually buy online. And I think that's going to be the future of stores, or clothing stores.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what will happen down the line. I mean, Walmart dominating so much of our economy for so long, but today's biggest retailer is an online store that owns no retail outlets, no big box stores. And there's so many examples of such valuable businesses today that don't own any real tangible assets. It's all based online. So many good examples of that out there on the marketplace. So again, we're talking about 7 steps for avoiding disastrous decisions, talking about the importance of writing stuff down, and also, ranking what is important to you. Give us another tip for this.
Sure. So the next step is to weighing how important each factor is. So let's say, which business supplier do you want to work with? We listed a number of factors, but then which of these is most important? Is cost the most important? Is experience the most important? Is reputation the most important? Is your existing relationship the most important? Evaluate each of these on a scale from 1 to 10 and see which of these is the most important to you.
How long?
One is least important, and so on.
Now, when we're talking about major decisions, first off, maybe we should try and distinguish between a major and a minor decision. Is there ways to do that effectively, to say, all right, this is major and requires this type of thought pattern, and this is minor and requires this type of thought pattern? Elaborate on this a little bit.
Yeah, so major decisions are ones that you make that cost you a significant amount of money, a significant amount of your budget. That's kind of one characteristic of a major decision. Another characteristic of a major decision is if it's a decision you make often. So you don't notice how much money and the resources and other sorts of resources it's costing you, but it's actually costing you quite a bit of resources. A simple example I like to use for businesses is, where do you get your office supplies? It might seem like a simple decision that you give me, one-time decision, but you have to get office supplies continuously and often. So it's quite beneficial to go through a systematic process of decision making in order to make that decision.
Okay.
As well as like the kind of example I was making which supplier do you want to work with, or which city do you want to move your office to, which employer do you want to which employee do you want to hire. Those are more obviously major decisions.
Okay,
so either significant one-time decisions or systematic decisions that add up.
Okay, so write out the relevant factors associated for your decision making, rank each option, give weights to each of the factors. Continue on with another tip here for us.
Sure. So the next thing is to weigh each of the options on all the relevant characteristics. So let's say if you are choosing between a supplier, let's say Nancy, who's a local supplier, Mark, who is a national supplier, and Susan, who is an international supplier. You want to rank each of them on experience, reputation, price, and relationship. Let's say those are the 4 factors. So you rank all of them on a scale of 1 to 10 on how good each one of those is. For example, Nancy, your local supplier, you might have the best relationship with her, but she might also have the highest price. So those are things that you need to figure out how to trade off. And that's the way you trade it off. You rate each one on each of those factors, and then you have a weight for those factors.
Good.
And then finally,
hold that point there when we go into the break, and we'll continue that point when we come back from the break. Currently talking to Gleb Sapersky. He is a disaster avoidance expert, professor at Ohio State, correct?
That's right.
And learn more about him at glebsapersky.com. And we're talking about the 7 steps for avoiding disastrous decisions. And I have an interesting question for you when we come back from the break about the power or the ability of quick decision making. A lesson I remember learning from Napoleon Hill in one of his books, studying the different entrepreneurs. So I'm going to ask him about, is it pertinent to ever be, or is it better to be a quick decision maker or somebody who takes more time? And so there's some theory out there on that. So we'll talk with him when we come back from the break on the all-new That Business Show 2.0. I'm your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business.
Hi, welcome to Yeager's. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeager's, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring-type products, hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
Hi, Jackie Skelton from JR World Travel here. If you travel, you need a licensed professional travel consultant, not a computer. Your licensed professional consultant can get you more for your time and your money. Value for your money and experience, not marketing salesmanship. When you're sick, you call the doctor. When you need legal advice, you call an attorney. So the next time you want to go on any type of travel, call your licensed professional travel consultant who actually represents you. We specialise in group travel, family reunions, weddings, to escorting large groups or making special arrangements for the disabled. Please call 844-249-0190. We are a full-service travel consultancy offering worldwide concierge service. Air, land, sea, rivers, resorts, locally, nationally and internationally. Remember that number, 844-249-0190.
Hey everyone, Jamie Maloney here, back on the all-new That Business Show 2.0, where business becomes show business. Talking about decision making with my guest, Gleb Sapersky, a disaster avoidance expert, also professor at Ohio State University. Learn more at glebsapersky.com. And Gleb, whenever I have a discussion on decision making, I recall the Napoleon Hill, who at the age of 20-something was sat down by the great Andrew Carnegie, and Andrew Carnegie tasked him with going out and studying all the great entrepreneurs, and that he would pay for his, lifestyle and, just a meager earnings, but he was introducing him to all the major players in business because he had those connections, and he wanted to know what made them tick. And people know today that Napoleon Hill, the founder of Think and Grow Rich and many other books, talking about the habits of highly successful people. When presented with that opportunity, Andrew Carnegie, when he said, "Will you do this?" was holding a stopwatch in his hand. And when Andrew Carnegie make the decision, had he waited longer than a minute to make the decision, he would have withdrawn the offer, because Andrew Carnegie believed that quick decision makers are more prosperous in life than people who are, slow to make decisions. And also something that Napoleon Hill found through his studies, the most successful people were found to be quick decision makers. Can you elaborate on this and what you know from your studies?
Sure. So people can make quick decisions successfully if they have a long-term experience in the field that they are making decisions in. So they can make reliable, quick decisions because they have a great deal of expertise. They can, choose between Nancy and so on, and Mac and Susan. If they have a great deal of expertise, they have certain automatic habits and processes in their minds that lead them to make pretty good decisions. However, that's rare for us to have extensive expertise in the field. A plumber who comes to your home to fix a plumbing problem can make a pretty good guess about what's clogged. Or a business expert who comes into a company as an analyst. When I do analysis in a company, for example, when I go and I deal with issues of diversity, that's one of my areas of expertise. And when someone tells me that, hey, they have a problem with their hiring, that their hiring is not diverse enough, I can pretty quickly tell that there's one common problem set that people don't pay enough attention to, is hiring people who are too similar to them and not giving negative points for similarity. It's something called the halo and horns effect in psychology, where we tend to like people who are similar to us. This is not simply about gender and ethnicity and so on. It's generally, if someone comes from the same college as we do, or someone comes from the same socioeconomic background, we tend to like that person more.
Now, have you always considered yourself a methodical decision maker? Was this something that you had to teach yourself too? How about you personally when making decisions?
Oh, yes, I definitely had to teach myself. I have a thinking error that's very common, which is called optimism bias. So I tend to be intuitively too optimistic. I tend to think things will go well and not prepare enough in advance, not lay enough resources on the side. If a meeting is going to be 15 minutes, if it takes me 15 minutes to drive to a meeting, I'd intuitively like to leave about 15 minutes in advance.
Right.
Now, that doesn't leave enough time and resources for contingencies. What if I forget my briefcase in my car or something like that? And then I have to go and run back for it and I'm late. That's bad. And other sorts of problems like this, when I'm too trusting because I'm too optimistic. So I had to learn that this is a failure mode that I tend to engage in. And therefore, I need to go from methodical decision-making process in order to make sure to avoid these sorts of decisions.
Do more people lean to the optimistic bias, or are more people more guarded in their decision-making as a whole?
Entrepreneurs tend to be more optimistic. So business people and entrepreneurs tend to be more optimistic. However, this often becomes a problem for them. There's a reason that about 80 to 90% of new businesses fail, because people tend to be too optimistic and they don't tend to make decision-making that is thorough enough and systematic enough. They tend to be more optimistic. They'll say, well, I'll launch this and things will go well. And they don't go well because they haven't put enough efforts into planning and strategy to make good decisions.
No, I agree. I look at people's projections sometimes. I was like, wow, this is a pretty big number. It's like, where are you getting that from? They're like, well, I'm good. I know these, it's just, I just see that too. So I definitely can agree that, entrepreneurs are definitely suffer from optimism bias. But then again, they kind of have to, because when they go to the bank for the loan, that's what the bank wants to see. They want to see, big numbers. And so that comes into play there. Talking about the 7 steps for avoiding disastrous decisions. We already went through a few of them. Give us one of the other tips here coming up.
Sure. So then you multiply your ratings of each of those decisions. Let's say Nancy, you multiply your rating for her costs by how important the cost is to you. And you get a total number. The tip sheet, which you can get from emailing me at gleb@intentionalinsights.org, goes through all the steps and clearly shows you a table for how you can do this. You can multiply them, and then you get a final number for each of them. For Nancy, for Mark, for Susan, for deciding whether to go with a local, national, or international supplier for your business. And this can be applied to, which city do you want to move to, your offices to, or which of these employees do you want to hire, and so on.
Now,
so that's next step.
How much research have you put into the table and the quantifying of this metric right here? Talk to me about the study that's went behind this.
Oh yeah, no, this is very in-depth kind of researched content. I'm just applying this to decision making in the business world. So this all draws on research on multiple attribute utility theory. This is a complex academic term for basically the theory of making decisions between options with multiple attributes. Like when you have like when you're working with a supplier and you're deciding which of 3 suppliers to work with, and you have a number of attributes on which you're making your decision, like reputation, costs, experience, the relationship. The same way when you're choosing an employee, you have a number of things that you need to trade off. Let's say an employee's fit in the company, what your anticipated salary is for that employee, what the employee's relationships are, and so on. Other things that you need to decide on. So you have several options that you're deciding on between employees and several attributes on which you're deciding on. So it's quite well researched, all these concepts.
And then after you quantify the value, you go back to instinct. You say, check with your gut. Take us down this path.
Absolutely. Yes. So here's where you want to work with your gut. So we go through a quantified process and we leave things out. That's great. Now you want to see if your gut matches your actual numbers. And this is an important step. We don't want to leave the gut out of the equation. So the gut is important here, and you see whether your ratings are actually match your gut intuitions. Maybe you don't have such a good relationship with Nancy as you thought. Or maybe the cost, you discover that the cost of the business is not as important to you as the reputation of that. You want to make sure that they're reliable. So your reputation is going to be really important to you. So here's where you check with your guts to make sure that the numbers that you came up with are matching your intuition, and you adjust those numbers to play around with them. And
then you adjust them based on what your intuition or your gut feeling is. After that, you say check for potential thinking errors. Elaborate on this.
Yes. So there are a whole bunch of thinking errors, like optimism bias, that cause us to make bad decisions. And here, where we want to look at optimism bias as one of these things. Are we too optimistic about the relationships that we have with these people? Are we too optimistic about their reputations and so on? Then pessimism bias. So some people tend to be pessimistic. So you usually wouldn't have these people be at the leadership positions in the organization. Usually they'd be in the COO, so like secondary positions, various VPs and managers. Those people often tend to be pessimistic. That's a good thing. You don't want someone in a leadership position who's pessimistic, but you want someone who is in a secondary leadership position to be pessimistic, not the absolute leader. But they would help ground the leader's feet, and that's a really helpful strategy. So optimism and pessimism are some things to check on. Another thing to check on is called planning fallacy. Planning fallacy is a very typical thinking error where we think that our plans will go perfectly. We make a plan and we think it will go perfectly. We don't build in enough contingencies. We don't build in enough things that we need to address. So that's where we might decide that, well, hey, maybe that person's reputation actually matters more than I thought it did. Because what if things go wrong and I'm working with a person who doesn't have a good reputation? And that's the big problem. So there are a whole variety of thinking errors that we need to check for and see whether they align with our actual choices.
And then the last step, once you make your choice, you stick with it. Go and close this out.
Once you make your choice, absolutely. So there's a strategy called pre-commitment, where it's been scientifically shown that if you try to change your mind based on after you make your decision, you're much less likely to make a good decision. So your first kind of decision making is a good pass, and you want to stick with that decision unless you have significant new information showing that your decision is wrong. So you don't go back, you don't waver between the decision. You stick with that supplier, you stick with that employee, you stick with that whatever decision you make. So commit to it and stick with it.
And good information, and people can pick up a copy of this information. It's an 11-page PDF packed with a lot more information than what we just went through here with the 7 steps for avoiding disastrous decisions. Gleb, real quick, the offer, how can people get this?
Mm-hmm. They can email me at gleb@intentionalinsights.org. Again, gleb@intentionalinsights.org, and tell me that they heard me on That Business Show, and they'll get a free copy of the tip sheet.
A lot of information packed into this PDF, so definitely reach out to him and take advantage of that free offer. So Gleb, great information. Thank you so much for being with me on the program today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, Jamie.
Absolutely. And learn more, glebsapursky.com. Sapursky spelled TSIPURSKY. And there it is up on the screen if you're watching the video on his show card. Learn more about us over at TampaBayRadio.com, and we'd love to hear your story too. Simply visit TBSinterview.com for more information. All shows available on demand, over 1,000 different interviews on iTunes and YouTube. Simply search for That Business Show. Hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and be sure to tune in again weekday mornings at 7 a.m. to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business.